Hi, I'm Marcos Siega. Welcome to the Sarah O'Connell Show.
Welcome to the Sarah O'Connell Show.
Marcos Siega, welcome to the Sarah O'Connell Show. How are you today?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm honoured to have you on my show, and I'm really excited to talk about all the amazing projects you've worked on. You are, of course, a legendary director and producer, but I want to talk about, first of all, when you were a kid, what were you aspiring to be when you grew up?
First, I was aspiring to be a professional soccer player. That's what my dad did for a living. And then pretty quickly a filmmaker. In my teens, I just fell in love with the idea of making movies and was pretty single-minded after that.
Love that. And so I'm going to be speaking about loads of TV shows and movies and all that good stuff that you've worked on. But I want to start with Dexter. Now, you joined the show in season 2. Can you tell me how you first came to be involved with it?
Yeah, I was a big fan of season 1, just watching as an audience member. And I called my agent and I said, this is a show I would love to do. Can you get me a meeting? And he called me back pretty quickly and said, I'm sorry, but they have their directors for the season. They're going to bring back the directors from season 1. And I begged, and I basically was like, you have to try to get me a meeting, just a meeting. And then it was luck, because apparently Clyde and Sarah Colleton and Robert Lewis, who was the line producer, were in town together. They hadn't started filming. They were looking for 1, maybe 2 directors. And my agent got me in there, and I went in, had a meeting, and I must have impressed them somehow. And I think it was just my enthusiasm for the show. And they asked me to do episode 2 of season 2. And that went really well. And then they had an opening for another one. They asked me for another one. And then before you know it, Clyde had me in regular rotation directing episodes.
That's amazing. And so the first season of Dexter followed the book very closely, the structure of it. But the second season went off in a completely new direction. Do you prefer it when shows and writers can do that, explore their own take on the character, because it gives you more opportunities, I think, to surprise the audience?
I do. From a storytelling perspective, I love it because you use the source material as a foundation, but then you can sort of break off and go in different directions. As a fan, sometimes of the property, the book, or whatever it might have been, it's hard to sort of wrap your head around it because you know what the story is. But I do enjoy when they do that. I've done that a few times. Kevin Williamson did it with Vampire Diaries. We did the pilot of that together, and then the show obviously has taken on a whole other life of its own. So coming into Dexter, I hadn't read the book. I'd only seen the first season. And to me, it was just Dexter's story in the television series.
Season 2 is about the Bay Harbor butcher and Doak's increasing obsession with finding out who it is, and obsession with Dexter as well. What did you love about their relationship between the two of them?
Well, I'm going to start with the Bay Harbor butcher. I loved the sibling aspect of it. Dexter not being able to let go of his brother. In episode 2, the first one I directed, there is a scene at the end where he finally lets go of his brother Brian. And that really got me. Just when I read that script, it felt important in the Dexter lore. The dopes of it all, that constant, the thing about the show early on is that there was always a monster of the week, right? You had your big bad, and then you had your individual monsters. But Dopes was the constant in terms of, he just had a feeling, and I loved that cat and mouse that they played, the idea that they had to share the same office basically, and Dexter needing to be on his toes around Dokes. That was just really fun to execute.
Yeah, because I loved the idea that he was the only police officer that could even detect that there was something up with Dexter and no one else was sensing it at all.
That's right. Yeah. And it was really just a sense, right? He's like, you're just odd. Something is wrong. You're not telling me everything.
And it was so much fun to watch. And of course, Michael Siega is an incredible actor, but can you tell me what he was like to work with?
Yeah, Michael is the most focused, and he's quiet. He doesn't. It's interesting. He's a lot like Dexter in terms of his stillness, and I think I've seen people be quite intimidated by him, just in terms of that. When somebody doesn't say a lot, you always think their wheels are turning, and you can't help but kind of be on edge. My approach with Michael was always very. I was pretty chatty with him, and constantly trying to get him to loosen up. And then eventually you do. You get that. You get on the inside, and it was just really fun working with him because I don't have to do a lot of explaining. But directing Michael is really just being there to protect him and to give him an adjustment, to suggest, here's what I'm hoping to feel. And he would do it one way, and you can sort of push him in a direction. He loves to be directed, but he also comes with a very specific point of view.
Season 3 introduced Jimmy Smits as Miguel Prado, and the 4th season explored the Trinity Killer with John Lithgow. But can you tell me what your personal favourite scenes and highlights and just memories of working on those original seasons are?
Yeah, I think one of my favorite scenes was in my first episode, and it is the scene when Dexter goes to Dexter, Rita, and the 2 kids go to the dad's funeral, and it's only the 4 of them who show up, and then Brian shows up as almost as his conscience again, and it's sort of, that was the way I shot that was sort of how I planned on shooting Deb in this current season, because they're both siblings, and the way he appeared and disappeared and the way she appeared and disappeared. But I had a lot of fun doing that, just because it was fun to figure out how to bring him into Dexter's world and not be the same as Harry.
Right.
And it was in his head. So I really love that. And then with Jimmy Smits, I think the moment we brought Jimmy into the kill room with Dexter, with Miguel and Dexter in the kill room, that might have been the first time Dexter has ever had anyone with him in a kill room. So that just felt really special, because again, you're doing something that's very you're breaking new ground, and Jimmy's such an incredible actor. Watching the 2 of them do their thing was really fun. And I have a running joke with John Lithgow, because I've never directed him with clothes on. Every scene we've ever done together, he was naked, and that was, I didn't expect that when I got to work with him, but memorable.
I have an opposite relationship with John Lithgow. He's only been on my show once. It was at a premiere in London, but he was very fully clothed at the time. So between us, we filmed him in all situations.
It's John Lithgow. Welcome to the Sarah O'Connell Show.
Fantastic. Yeah.
We cover the whole Lithgow experience.
That's right.
So when I was watching the original series of Dexter, in my mind, it could only have ended in 2 possible ways. I thought he's either going to get caught and probably go on death row, or he's going to just escape. And when it got to the actual finale, I did not in any way predict what was going to happen. He goes into a hurricane. He becomes a lumberjack. What were your thoughts on that ending? Because you didn't work on that season. So watching it as a viewer, what were your thoughts on it?
Well, I've said this in a few interviews. I didn't watch the show after I left.
Right.
So seasons 5, 6, 7, 8 didn't really exist to me. I knew what had happened, but I didn't watch the show. So I didn't have the reaction, I think, that a lot of fans did in terms of even moving forward. I knew that Michael wasn't happy and needed closure, which was part of what was exciting for me to come and do the new one. But I didn't have a particular feeling, because I made a choice to not be as invested anymore. And it was partly because I wasn't doing the show anymore.
Sure. I guess it's different too for people that have worked on it, because you have to become so engrossed in the shows you are working on, and you work so hard and you've worked on so many projects as well, that I guess it takes up too much time and space to be thinking about these shows you used to work on when you're focusing on the ones you're at right now.
It does. I'm able to enjoy some shows when I move on, but it really is about time. And when you're on a show, it's 24/7. You're trying to figure out how to make it and make it great. And I don't get to watch a lot of other television. When I do find myself with that time, it's usually sort of exploring and seeing what's out there as opposed to looking at something I've done.
Yeah.
So it really is just time. That's the number one reason I didn't go back to watching it.
I can very much relate. There's so many amazing shows out there that have won awards and things, and I just don't have time to watch them because I spend all my time working on my show. So I found a way around that by interviewing people that are working on things I love. So I have an excuse to sit down and just watch everything for a week.
Right. That's great.
So that works quite well. So can you tell me, when did you first hear about Dexter New Blood and how did you get involved with it? Obviously, you had a legacy of working on it before.
When I left the show, the season that Clyde left. So to answer the back half of your question, Clyde, he was the only showrunner I knew on the show, right? Mm-hmm. And I think I directed the majority of episodes while he was there. So we had a good relationship. I had a great relationship on set with Michael, but then we became friends, and it changes, right? Your working relationship and your friendship are two different things, and you get a little insight into people and how they are and what they're like off set. And I think that comfort level when they decided that they were going to do this and they wanted someone to come in and be a partner with them, the comfort for Michael and the comfort for Clyde are what brought me, to the table. And I was directing the final 2 episodes of The Flight Attendant, and I was on set. And I got a text message from Clyde to call him, and I hadn't heard from him in a while, so I thought something was wrong. You get those messages, and when you don't expect it, and I really was like, oh, I hope nothing bad has happened to somebody. And he was like, we're going to do a new 10 episodes of Dexter, and do you want to do it? I said yes. I didn't ask to read anything. Absolutely. My first question was, what does Michael think? What is he? And he said, Michael is really excited. He wanted to call you first, but I told him I was going to call you. And then a few moments later, Michael called. And from that moment on, I knew I was doing it. And I think that was September of 2020.
When we catch up with Dexter, he's obviously in a much different place, not just geographically, but in his life. He's not as careful too. When he worked at Miami Metro, he was a lot more careful about not leaving evidence behind and stuff like that. Do you think that if in the situation he finds himself in, if his past hadn't have caught up with him, he would have genuinely left his serial killer days behind?
Well, I think that's what we find him doing, right? Is working hard to abstain. Right. And I think that would have continued. Dexter as in the Dexter universe, Dexter as a person has that discipline. It's hard for him, but you see that in the very beginning. He has a routine. He has to stick to it. I don't think he's looking to go backwards. His conscience, which we see manifested as Deb, they're at peace. They're just routine, and blend in, and don't go back. So I do think had the events of the season not had happened, he would have maintained. And it wasn't Harrison, right? It was Matt.
Yeah, that's true.
A few things had to happen in order for everything to align for him to slip backwards. If he hadn't delivered the rifle to the party, none of this would have happened. Even if Matt was an asshole to him in the store. So, and then had he not had the encounter with him at the pub, what would have happened? So I think the writers did a really good job of sort of the stars aligning. And Dexter not being able to resist that urge.
I was so delighted to see Jennifer Carpenter return as Debra. What was her reaction like to being back on set? Because I certainly didn't expect her character to ever return. And did she get a kick out of playing a ghostly version of her?
I think she loved it. She was very active in talking about the character before we shot and understanding what role Debra would play, how Jen always makes really good suggestions in terms of Deb's character and how to play the different levels. Sometimes she would choose not to say something because she felt it was too on the nose. And even though we would do it, she's a team player and she would always let, if I wanted something, she would do it. We'd get into the cutting room and inevitably you'd feel that that was the right choice. She had the right instincts. So it's really great to have somebody like Jennifer who shows up and wants to be there, wants to do it, and wants to make it special.
I also loved the big bad of the season, Clancy Brown, and I also really enjoyed the fact that his arc kind of wrapped up in the 9th episode. So when we go into the 10th one, you genuinely have no idea where it's going to go from there.
Yeah, I think that's by design. And, when I got the job, they had 10 scripts written. So I had the privilege of sitting down and reading more than 500 pages of story. And I was turning the page the same way the audience is watching the TV. So when we got to the 9th episode, I'm reading episode 9 and I see what happens and I'm trying to figure out what's happening next. I mean, I had the same experience the audience had because we weren't writing as we went. I was handed all 10 scripts to do at once.
And I also loved that Angel Batista came back for a couple of episodes too. Were there ever any thoughts of bringing back other older characters as well, or maybe having Dexter interact with them on scene at the same time at any point?
No, because I did ask when I first got the job who was coming back. Clyde really wanted me to read the scripts and see and discover it for myself, but he did say that there was only two returning, maybe three. The maybe three was John Lithgow. We weren't sure if he would come and do one little scene because it's just him getting out of a bathtub. So I don't think it was. It might have been a conversation in the writers' room when they were breaking story, but it wasn't when I came on board. And I'll be honest, when I read, as I said, I was reading the episodes just like the viewers watching them. I fully expected Batista to show up in episode 10 in a confrontation with Dexter, not in the way that he does, right? So even reading it, I thought that would happen. But I understood when I got to the end, I'm like, oh, I think this is for the best. I mean, what does that scene really look like? Unless there was an idea for Dexter to carry on. When Batista shows up, is it Dexter behind bars and they have a conversation and Batista gets his closure? But then what about Dexter? He still has to escape, right? And it's not like there was an opportunity to do more episodes. It was, we're doing 10 episodes and this is a story we have to tell. So in reading it, I thought he'd come back. There'd be some sort of scene between them. That would have been fun. But I think this is what makes strong television is you're making bold choices and it's horrible. It's dreadful that you don't get to see it, but that's kind of the point.
Yeah, because you have these two characters almost on a collision course. Dexter gets caught. He's in a prison cell. He can't go anywhere. And Batista's on his way. They just managed to miss each other again. Yeah,
and it's what makes Dexter, it's what kicks it into the next gear, right? And when he finds out that Batista's on his way, you can see if you watch that scene, and when I was shooting that scene, Michael has that moment where it turns. He has to act. He has to do something. Because if Batista shows up, that's it, right? He's been talking his way out of everything. There is no talking his way out of that one. So it was such a big moment. And, I read things online, about how Dexter was so out of character. And I disagree, and I know Michael disagrees. It wasn't. This is who Dexter is.
Right.
We've just never seen him get to that point where he can't get out of it, and he was desperate. And
yeah, this is the first time he's been truly cornered.
That's right. Well, yeah, he's been cornered in the movie way before, right? And now it's like, how do you get out of this one? Well, there has to be another way out. And his way out, he didn't want to kill Logan. He wanted to just get out. He even says, the voiceover says it, just don't do anything stupid, Logan. I think he would have knocked him out if he could. But when the gunshot went off and Logan fell, he snapped his neck. And shit, that happened. You know.
Speaking of cameos, you mentioned John Lithgow. How did that come about? Did he sign on before filming started, or did you have a way that you could have tackled that scene if you couldn't have brought him back?
Sure, we could have. We had footage of Lithgow, you know, from the original in the tub with Rita. We had footage of baby Harrison in there. So we could have done a number of things, but we wanted Lithgow to get out and come over and say the line to Harrison. And I think it was just Clyde called John and asked him, and he said absolutely, and he came. It happened before we started filming. I think and mostly it's just if there was any delay or any hiccup, it was schedule. You know, John's a busy man, and figuring out when we could get him there and accommodate his schedule and make it work in our schedule.
Of course. And so let's speak about the final episode now, the finale. Of course, there's going to be spoilers for anyone that hasn't watched it, but I imagine there's been a fair few by now. You know, go pause this, go watch them, come back. So was it set in stone really early on when discussions first started about reviving Dexter that this would be the end of his story, or was there a consideration that he could go on for another season or two and then meet his fate?
This was always it. I think what Michael has done interviews, Clyde has done interviews, and I think what the fans online are missing when they say it was rushed, it could have gone on for more, we wanted more. We understand that because you're giving them something they loved.
Yeah. And
we hopefully did it well. And then you have it and you're like, I love this again. I wanted to keep going. But the only reason it happened was because Michael read the idea and was like, this is it. This is what I want. There were plenty of other attempts, years, you know, in the making of trying to get Dexter back. And it could be that in some of those, Dexter would have continued on. But it's not what Michael wanted. He wanted to put it to rest. He needed closure. And at least for my experience, when I came on board, this was always the idea. The scripts were already written, and that was it.
One really interesting thing that I found out was that the final scene where Dexter dies was actually filmed 3 weeks into production, and you had another 4 or 5 months to go because of how much snow was available at the time. Did that bring some sort of sense of closure to the cast and crew as well? Because you had this scene where Dexter dies, but then he's still living on in these other scenes that you're filming?
Well, it didn't bring any closure. It brought a tremendous amount of anxiety because we really wanted to keep the ending a secret. Right. But we knew going in that we had to film it. It was 2.5 weeks in, and we didn't give the script to anyone. The crew that was on set was minimal, and most of the surrounding crew, support staff, didn't know what we were filming. We were filming a scene in the woods with Dexter and Harrison. That was the end, but we didn't tell them what happened.
Right.
So I was anxious about trying to maintain the spoiler and keep that in. It was tough to do so quickly because we were jumping to the end of our journey and the actors had not spent a ton of time together. I had purposely tried to film as many big Harrison Dexter scenes early on so that they would have a little history. I was able to do a couple of big ones. The scene where the therapist scenes we did on day one of filming. And we tried to get as many of the father-son moments in before we got to the end. And then it was just, we rehearsed on Zoom, me, Michael, and Jack, and then I'm sure they rehearsed alone quite a bit. There was a couple of changes to the script that Michael made after we worked on it. And but the ending was always the same. There were 2 gunshots that we filmed.
Right.
The first one, the way it was scripted, felt as if Harrison made the decision, and the bullet grazes Dexter's cheek, and it was very poetic in the callback to how Dexter did the blood slide on his victims. And then the second gunshot is when Dexter gives him permission. When we were editing, it just felt like the decision had to very firmly be Dexter's.
Yeah.
And we had plenty of options in performance. We didn't rush through those scenes. So I did a lot of takes. I had a lot of options in how it would play. And ultimately, we were all really pleased.
Did you film any fake endings as well, just in case it leaked out?
No, we didn't have time to do anything except for what was on the page.
And I really loved that moment with Deb when she's holding Dexter's hand at the end. What was the atmosphere like on set that day?
It was emotional, and again, only 2.5 weeks in, but it was emotional for those of us that had a history with it. In the script, it's Dexter that lets go of Deb, and when we were shooting it, Jennifer suggested that she sort of pull away from his hand, and that's what ended up being in the cut. It just really worked. Look, it's 2 seconds in the episode, right? When we were doing it, we did it a few different ways. I covered it a few different ways for that very reason. It was emotional, and we weren't sure what would be the most impactful.
And so you directed 6 out of 10 of the episodes. Have you got a favorite moment from that reunion with the cast and crew?
Yeah, I think it's my favorite moment might have been the moment that Michael and I stepped into the kill room for the first time.
Yeah.
We hadn't been in the kill room since, he hadn't done it since the end of season 8. We hadn't been together doing it since season 4.
That he tells you that he hasn't been in a kill room.
That's true. That is true. I don't know who I'm talking to sometimes. Is Michael Dexter or is Dexter Michael? But it was that. We had kill rooms that you're killing somebody, and you would think that it's heavy and, sort of an atmosphere of dread. It's the opposite. It was fun and exciting to be doing it again. And Michael had a big smile on his face all day. And I just enjoyed every moment of bringing it to life.
There was a suggestion towards the end that Dexter would go to Los Angeles with Harrison and start a new life. And you can sort of imagine in your mind a new season starting with the 2 of them in LA. At the end, when Harrison drives off, do you think he's going to LA or somewhere else?
Well, if we follow the story, he's going to the reservation that Angela sent him to. When we were doing it, that's where he was going. We didn't have he's going to LA or some other city or, I don't know if that continues or not. It wasn't an idea when we were shooting it to continue. Dexter is Dexter, not Harrison. So,
right.
To me, it was closure on the series. And if there were to be any more, it would have to come from story. It would have to come from something really spectacular. But it wasn't something that we planned on or talked about as we were filming the season.
And so if the story did continue with Harrison, would you be open to returning to the show as well?
I would love to, but I can't. I almost couldn't do this because I'm, deal at Warner Brothers, different studio. They had to loan me out to Showtime, and it was a complicated deal to make. And I'm still in a deal at Warner Brothers for another 3 years. So unless it was 3 years from now and I wasn't in a deal, I couldn't, even if I wanted to, I couldn't be a part of it. If I was free and the circumstances were different, and Clyde asked me, I would be inclined to say yes, but honestly, it would depend on story.
Sure.
I wouldn't say yes just to do a spinoff. Yeah. It would have to be because this is a fantastic story that they're telling.
What was it like with the show being released and fans watching it week by week? Was it fun to see their reactions and their speculation and sort of theories of what might happen over those 10 weeks that the show was back on?
It was really fun. Historically, I would not go online to look at what people are saying about anything I've done. It's just not something I really did. Sometimes somebody would send me something and say, "Oh, look at this," and I would look at it and be great. But with this one, there was a real sense of, I felt like we were also proud of it. I really wanted to get feedback. I wanted to know what people were thinking. And it was slow at the beginning in terms of getting, I think people didn't know what to expect. So if it wasn't what they were used to, and we did a lot of things differently, it didn't get the rave reviews that you would hope. But we were happy, so it kind of didn't matter. It's like sometimes you make something and it's not as good as it can be, and when people call it out, it's like, I wish I could do that again. With this, I was just so pleased with everything, and I know Michael was pleased, and studio, everyone involved. We went in and we came out of it really happy with how it turned out. Until the last episode, I actually called Michael on Saturday before the finale, and I said, "Are you ready for the hate mail?" And he was like, "I'm so nervous about like what people are going to say or think." But again, he was satisfied, and so was I. We just knew that people were going to have a reaction. I didn't expect it to be as negative. When people say it's a worse ending than season 8, like I said, I wasn't a part of that I wasn't a part of hating season 8, right, because I hadn't experienced season 8. But what I felt was unfair is that they went from "we love it, we love it, we love it, we love it" to "it's the worst piece of garbage ever." And that stings, because I know it's not. It's just not the ending people want. Right. And when they say it's rushed, I completely understand what people mean when they say it's rushed, but it's like in real life, things happen. They just happen. And this was a thing where we wanted closure for Dexter, and sure, we could have had a confrontation. We could have had elongated the scenes, elongated the season, but this is how it was meant to happen. Yeah. And that's what it is.
But see, I think that hate is coming actually from a place of love. They're upset just because they love that character so much. It's not because they didn't enjoy the show. And to me, that season is up there with the best of the original Dexter seasons anyway. I really did enjoy it. And I liked that the show gave you the possibility that he could go away and continue having adventures with Harrison. He could end up in jail. He could end up back in Florida on death row. All those paths are laid open to the audience that could all happen. But then life gets in the way, and Dexter has to react to what's happening in real time to him and go off in this different direction again. If you wanted the character to survive 50 more seasons, of course you're upset that that won't happen. But if you're looking at it that this is the end of Dexter's story, then it does bring you closure, I think.
Yeah, I think so. I feel exactly like that. It's I don't think fans are going to easily accept that, though, because they did enjoy the ride, and then it was taken away. I fully understand it. I don't really get upset when I read the negative comments about the final episode. I get upset when the comments are personal, because I'm a human being, and I'm like, you put a lot of love into something, and then it's like the criticism, but that's part of my job. Story-wise, I think in time people who really hated it, if they love the show and they go back and watch it again, I think you start to realize there's only one way it could end for Dexter. He's a lovable serial killer, but he's a serial killer, and that's really kind of, it was a fitting end for him.
In the context of that, I went back when it finished and just started rewatching the old episodes. And if you see it all, everything he's been through, everything he's done, everything he's gotten away with and framed other people for, it's a fitting ending for him. And it's a personal one. The only other way I thought it could have ended was if he went on to death row. And in an early season of Dexter, there's that scene of him watching someone else on the electric chair and then seeing his reflection in the glass. And I thought it could have been like Harrison watching his dad.
Yeah, I directed that episode, the moment where Dexter's watching. And I thought about that. Like I said, when I read the scripts, the ending was what you saw. But we talked, Michael and I would joke about alternate endings. Yeah, we joked that if we filmed a scene where, when Dexter breaks out of prison, out of the jail, and calls Harrison on Logan's phone, he answers it. Dexter tells him to meet him in the woods. We could have cut it where Dexter met him in the woods, Harrison kills him, and then you hear a phone ringing, and it's Harrison waking up, and he just dreamt that he killed his dad.
Right.
There's a number of ways we could continue. The fandom has presented 100 different ways in theories, and a lot of them are really fun and could be interesting. But at the end of the day, you're prolonging the inevitable.
Yeah.
Right. You need to get to this moment. And do you do it when the show has run its course again? Do you go out and just play out a bunch of seasons of Dexter nearly getting away? What the audience is getting is Dexter, the fun of Dexter. They love that. And we didn't do this to take that away from them. We did this to give the character closure.
Yeah. It's a sad ending, but it makes sense for the character. And most people are just upset because they love the characters, not because the show was bad. I mean, I was hooked. I was on the edge of my seat every single episode. Compared to a lot of the shows that are out now, Dexter is still one of my favorites of all time.
Did you have a favorite episode
of the new season? Genuinely, every time there was an episode out and I was waiting for the next one, sort of midweek, I'd go back and watch the last episode again just to keep me going. That long corridor when it had all the people in the boxes and all the stuff with Harrison was so good, how that played out slowly. Is he going to find out about Dexter, isn't he? And when all that stuff about his past came up in the podcast, just everything with Deb as well.
Yeah, I just turned the tables on you and started interviewing you.
Yeah, no, do it. It's fine. So I'll reverse that question then. What's your all-time favorite scene from the new season?
I had a couple. In the introduction of Deb, was one of those things where I imagined it a certain way and we shot it and I executed it, and it's rare that exactly what you hoped for is what you get. And I just love that moment, the stillness of it. There's not a lot of dialogue. It's just how do we introduce Debra back into his world, and the moment she's at the table and then when she disappears. I just really love that. Then it's the therapist scenes, the two therapist scenes. It was day one of filming and we had rehearsed it, but I just love both of those moments. We see two of those scenes in episode 6, and I think those are my two favorite in terms of performance. And then episode 9, what you were kind of calling out is the reveal of Kurt's, of the tomb. That whole sequence from Clancy burning down the cabin through the reveal that the girls are down there, and then seeing Molly and Dex and Harrison saying this son of a bitch has to die. That turning point for him.
I really just want to thank you for bringing Dexter back, and to me it was a really satisfying closure on something that wasn't satisfying when it finished the last time.
Well, thank you, Sarah. It's very kind. It's nice to hear a positive thing once in a while. Right.
And so now I want to go in a completely different direction with you. I want to go back to the 80s, you helped form the punk band Bad Trip and produced lots of music, released it. Is music something you still work on in your spare time? Are you still creating music?
No, the band for me was, I was part of I grew up around a number of friends who were in a hardcore scene in New York. And they were in some great bands of that genre, and probably the biggest bands of that genre. And it was just a really fun movement to be a part of. And it was very DIY. I picked up a guitar not knowing how to play a guitar, and then if you're in this band and you're playing at CBGB's, and then you're recording a record. But it was always, for me, it was always something I did with my friends, something I did for the art of it. It's really creative. And my mind was always on wanting to be a filmmaker at that point. So I got to film a lot of bands, and that's how I started directing music videos, is my exposure to those bands. You're
credited as a post-production assistant on Sleepless in Seattle. Was that your first foot in the door of movie making?
Little known fact, Nora Ephron was my mentor. I met her, I was dating a girl who was her nanny.
Oh, wow.
And I was 19. I was in my band. I started dating this girl. She was Nora Ephron's nanny. I wanted to be a filmmaker, and I got to meet Nora. I started working for her, any odd jobs. But I was there, and she's married to Nick Pileggi, who wrote Goodfellas and Casino. And so being a part of that world, getting to see them work, they were really fantastic mentors. And her son, Max, I encouraged him to play guitar because I was playing guitar. He would come on tour with my band at 10 years old. We'd take him on trips in the van, and now he's a big musician. He's a guitar player for Taylor Swift and a musical director for Wheezer, and that was a great history. But yeah, she gave me my first job as a production assistant.
I love that. And did you work on Alien Ant Farm's music video movies?
I did. There's 2 videos for that. There's one I made, and there's one that Mark Klasfeld directed. I think the one that made it to MTV might have been Mark's. I'm not sure, but I did do one for movies. Yeah.
Yeah, because I loved that song when it came out. And you also worked with Weezer and Blink-182. What were your favorite music videos that you worked on during that period?
Well, I was lucky because I got to do videos for bands that I loved. I didn't really, my favorite was probably Keep Fishin', Weezer's video with the Muppets, because I got to work with the Muppets and Weezer. And that was just fantastic.
Love that. I recently watched your movie Chaos Theory, which I absolutely love. If you haven't seen it, please do go check it out. That scene in the kitchen with Ryan Reynolds and his wife thinks that he's
Emily Mortimer.
Yeah, and there's this big confusion. I just love that scene so much. It was a lot of fun. Can you tell me what Ryan Reynolds was like to work with?
Ryan was great. The whole cast was great. I had made a little movie that went to Sundance called Pretty Persuasion, and out of that, Warner Independent had this script, Chaos Theory, very low budget, it was a couple of $1 million, and we were looking for a lead, male to play the lead. I knew Ryan from Van Wilder. This is before he had broken out, and from the TV show he did, 2 Guys, a Girl, and a Pizza Place, I think it was called, and sent him the script. We had a meeting at some hotel in Los Angeles, and he said yes. We got to shoot it up in Vancouver, where he's from. He was just the nicest guy, the funniest guy. He's probably one of the most down-to-earth people you'll ever meet. And even now with all the success, he's easy. Just I have nothing but good things to say about the guy.
And can you tell me, have you ever said yes to chaos and made a life-changing decision by shuffling index cards?
Never by shuffling index cards, but I do believe in taking chances. And that was sort of the crux there, right, is you have to take chances sometimes. And if you don't, nothing happens, right? So I've never done it by mixed cards, but I definitely have done it.
And so you went on to direct an episode of True Blood and then worked on the Vampire Diaries. And the pilot episode of that had the biggest audience since the CW had launched in 2006. And of course, the show went on to have 8 seasons and a spin-off show as well. What do you attribute to that show's success?
I think themes. Kevin and Julie they know how to write to their audience. It's that love triangle of Damon, Stefan, and Elena was just so incredibly delicious and propelling. And I think that's what launched it, right? And then you have all these peripheral characters that people fall in love with, and the story can evolve from there. But it's really Kevin and Julie's writing and how they tell story.
And you were, speaking of vampires, you were at one point attached to a Lost Boys reboot as well. Are you still working on that, or what happened with it?
No, we started shooting that in April of 2020. We filmed for 3 days and then we shut down because of COVID. It was the original pandemic shutdown when the world went into lockdown. And it was Warner Brothers and the CW was doing a number of pilots, and after the pandemic, they had to go into production, and they just made their choices, which shows they were going to do. There were no finished pilots, and they didn't pick up the Lost Boys, so nothing's happened. It just it gets put away.
Speaking of classic shows, you also worked on a remake of Charlie's Angels. Are there any other classic TV shows that you'd love to revive?
No, I learned a big lesson on Charlie's Angels. You leave those shows alone. That's what I learned on that. No, I can't think of anything I'd want to remake or redo. I was a big TV watcher growing up, but I don't think there's any particular show that calls me back, that makes me want to redo it.
I loved The Following. Can you tell me what Kevin Williamson's like to work with? You've collaborated with him quite a few times now.
Yeah, Kevin's just, I think he's brilliant. He
time after time as well.
Yeah, but his way of thinking. I've read his pilots. I read a lot of pilot scripts, and the thing about Kevin's always ended with this propulsion of like you see there's a series here. It's not just a one-off. It's his dialogue. It's the way he likes to construct the story. It's like I said with Vampire Diaries. He just has a knack for that. Look, I've been very fortunate. I keep saying, Ryan Reynolds was great. Kevin Williamson's great. I can tell you Kevin Bacon was great. Michael, I've been very lucky to work with actors who've given themselves and are trusting and collaborative. So there hasn't been too many negative experiences in my work. I
had the opportunity to interview author Caroline Kepnes, and of course she wrote You. Now you directed a few episodes of that show. What did you think of the character of Joe, having previously worked on Dexter as well?
Yeah, so I came on to that. We hadn't started filming at all, and Lee Krieger was doing the first 2 episodes, or the first episode, and then I came in as an executive producer. I immediately made the connection to Dexter.
Right.
In terms of how the story was told in voiceover, I certainly brought some of how I had done Dexter to the table. And when we're shooting Joe, thinking, and the similarities were there. I was really surprised. There's a scene in the pilot where he's outside of Beck's window and he's masturbating. And I remember I was on set. I didn't direct that episode, but I was on set, and I thought, how do we come back from this? How do people like this guy? And I think what Sarah Gembel did with the material, the book was great, but she then, I think if you think of the neighbor, the young boy who lived next door, it's sort of the save the cat syndrome, right?
Right.
In the TV series, it gave Joe somebody to take care of, somebody to look out for, and it made him very likable. I think had you not had that part of the story, it wouldn't have been as successful as it was.
It's interesting. So I think he's kind of a harder sell to like than Dexter is, because while Dexter is a serial killer, he also has a code and only kills bad people. Whereas Joe is kind of feels a bit more impulsive and doesn't necessarily get the right people all the time.
Which is why I was surprised. And that's why I asked the question, how do we win the audience back? I think it's a fine line. Part of it is Penn. Penn has a likable quality to him. And, if you really imagine another actor in there who's maybe not so likable, Joe is a tough character to root for.
Yeah. One show that hasn't been available in the UK, but I've seen clips of it, and it's such a fun concept, is God Friended Me. And I think you directed 14 episodes of it.
That was a show I developed with Brian Wimbrant and Stephen Lillian. It was their idea, and I loved it. It was for me, it was an opportunity to do something different. It's a feel-good show.
Yeah.
And we had a great cast. It was a little bit like going to camp when we were making it, because we weren't killing people, we were helping people, and very uplifting. I thought it was funny. The problem with the show is that it was called God Friended Me, and right. the world and religion, it's a slippery slope. So there are certain markets that just wouldn't touch it. And I just think it was a tough sell internationally. So the shows can't survive on just having domestic success.
Still really hope it comes over to the UK, because from what I've seen, it seems like a really uplifting.
It was. It's fun.
And it's
fun
a great
show.
Concept as well.
Great concept. Yeah.
You worked on the pilot of Batwoman. Are there any other superheroes that you'd love to work on? Obviously, they're getting more and more popular. There's multiple Marvel TV shows and movies out every year. DC are ramping up their production too. Is there any other superheroes you'd love to be involved with?
Yeah, look, if there was one that I could do, it would be Deadpool.
Oh, really?
I think it just suits my sensibilities. I'm not a huge superhero fan. Shouldn't say fan. I actually really enjoy all those movies for different reasons, both Marvel and DC. I think the Marvel ones are just more fun, and I'm in. Like I will go to any one of them.
Right.
Deadpool, I really loved the first film, and I like the second one as well. But just knowing Ryan and how he was always a creative force behind that. He was talking about doing Deadpool when we did Chaos Theory. And that was even before he did Green Lantern. So I think that's the one I really want to do. And yeah, definitely Deadpool.
Yeah, I'd love to see that. And so earlier on, you mentioned the Flight Attendant. You directed the final 2 episodes. In the finale, they go to Rome. Did you actually go there, or was that just movie magic?
No, they went there. They were shut down. They, being the show, was shut down during the original pandemic, the same time I was shut down on Lost Boys.
Right.
And they had a delivery date. The show was going to air, and they hadn't finished the final 2 episodes. They'd only shot the Rome stuff. Different director had gone to Rome, and they filmed the scenes in exterior Rome. I did all the Rome interiors, which was movie magic. But when they were riding their Vespa, they were really in Rome. And when she was speaking to the grandmother, they were really in Rome. Yeah,
because there's a lot of movies and TV shows that say they're somewhere and they're obviously not. But watching it, because I've been to Rome, I really felt like they were in Rome.
No, they were.
Yeah, that's why it's so realistic.
Yeah, we've been, look, I think there's less and less cheating these days, even on God Friended Me, which was a show for CBS. We went to Paris, and we filmed for 2 episodes in Paris. We filmed in Snowbird in Utah. So a show will travel when it needs to be authentic.
And so one thing I wondered too, when I was watching The Flight Attendant, when an episode ends on a cliffhanger and the next scene of the next episode is in the same place and just continuing that scene, does the previous director film that entire scene and then you just continue past that point? Or do you have to pick up from the middle of a scene and continue it, if that makes sense?
Yeah, you pick up in the middle of the scene. The director, when the script ends in that particular episode, that director is done. And then if it's a direct pickup, the next director comes in and you continue the scene.
Right.
So we did blocks on that. So I did episodes 9 and 10 together. So the cliffhanger between 9 and 10, we just continued shooting. But the cliffhanger from 8 to 9 was on a street when I don't remember the character names. Michelle's character puts a gun to Kayley, and then my episode starts with she ducks into an alley. So I just picked it up. Miranda, thank you. Yeah.
Because I need an excuse to go back and watch that too. So
yeah, do that. That's a really fun show.
I love that really show, and I'm really excited about season 2. Are you working on season 2 in any capacity?
No, I was I was doing Dexter when they started. So, and they're shooting in a new location. They're not in New York.
So here's a question I ask every guest on the Sarah O'Connell Show. Can you tell me a fun fact about you, something we may not know, a hobby, a party trick, something like that?
I love to doodle.
Do you?
I doodle a ton. It's sort of my journaling. I do a couple of doodles a day, and I keep them in a book. I doodle all over my script, even doodle storyboards. But that's something I love to do. I love to draw. I paint and doodle.
I love that. I'm very much the same way. If I'm ever in a meeting, everything just gets covered. And even when I was doing my exams at school, I got into trouble because the final few pages would always be just blank, so you could write notes. Mine would just be covered in Tom and Jerry and stuff like that.
You need somewhere for that energy to go, right?
I know, but it paid off because I then got a degree in art. So
there you go.
It made sense I did that during my science exam.
Yeah.
Now, you've worked on some of my favorite shows, but can you tell me which ones are you loving at the moment? Which are your all-time favorites?
Well, all-time favorites, I'm going to go back to when I was young. The show that made me want to direct television was a show called Hill Street Blues. Yep. And it was a police show. And then The Sopranos is what made me change my mind because I was very much, I'm a feature film director. That's what I want to go do. And then watching The Sopranos, I was like, this is as good as any movie I've seen recently, and I would love to do this. And then honestly, Dexter was pretty early on. It was a thing, it kind of struck me as like, television is really good, and I want to get in on that. Currently, I really loved the Queen's Gambit last year or 2 years ago.
Amazing show.
And The Great. I think those were two of my favorite series in the last 2 years. As I said earlier, I don't get a ton of free time to watch a lot. There's so much, and they're an investment in time. Sex Education, I really enjoyed. But I keep missing, I'll watch like 3 episodes and then I run out of time. I get busy, and then 7 months later, I'll watch another 3 episodes, so it's a tough way to stay engaged, but there's a lot of great television out there. There's a lot.
I mostly wait until the entire show's finished, and except for Dexter, which I watched at 3 a.m. when it was available. But there's so many shows that I've had to wait until the entire show is just available so that I can binge watch the entire season in one day. Then I wait a year and then watch the next season in one day. It's quite intense, depending on the kind of show you're watching.
That's true. I'm always looking for some levity, something. I think that's why I enjoyed The Great so much. It was fun to watch.
You are in Florida at the moment working on a show called Bad Monkey. Can you tell us a little bit about it? It's an Apple TV show.
Yeah, it's it's based on a book by Carl Hyacin, who's an author, a big Floridian. He's written dozens of books about Florida, the characters in Florida. And Bill Lawrence, who is the showrunner on Ted Lasso, adapted the book and wrote he's the showrunner. It's something I pursued. When I read the script for the pilot, I absolutely loved it. And same as with Dexter, I went and said to my team, get me a meeting with Bill. I have ideas. I want to pitch to him. And I did. And it wasn't until after I'd read the script that I found out that Vince Vaugn would be the lead. And that's really exciting. I was always a fan of Vince's. And when I read the script and I was told Vince was the lead, I immediately clicked. I'm like, it's written for him. I could hear his voice in it. And we're prepping. We don't start filming for another 3 weeks. So I'm in the thick of casting and scouting and just getting ready to go. But I'll be here till July. So this is my year.
Oh, wow. I'm excited to see more about that show. It sounds amazing. And
It's
you're
fun.
also attached to Mothers of Invention, a show about two women in 1960s Brooklyn. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, there's development, and then there's development hell. That one has
Right.
been in development hell for a long time. It's written by a really good friend of mine named Kathy Ebel. It's loosely based on, it's not even loosely based. There are parts of it that are inspired by Estee Lauder, her story, and how she came to be. But it's a fictional series, and I don't know if it'll ever get made. But I have a number of projects that I'm trying to get off the ground.
Would you like to work on any more movies again in the future as well?
I'd love to work on a movie. I do read feature scripts, but the movies that get made these days are either big tentpole movies, your big superhero movies. There's really nothing in the middle anymore. I mean, now that Netflix and HBO Max are making films, maybe there are, but I haven't read anything that I've loved. And I really do love making television. Yeah. So we'll see. I like I said, I have a couple of things with some great writers that are in development. Hard to say because I've sold a number of projects in the past year. That doesn't mean they're going to get made. So I hesitate to even talk about them.
Of course. Well, I'm still waiting for your Deadpool movie anyway. So that's going to be amazing.
That's never going to happen, I don't think. But that's the movie I'd want to make.
I think it could happen. I think someone watching this will just make it happen.
I'm taking your word for it, Sarah.
Yeah,
that's
no
great.
pressure. That's fine. Might take a couple of tweets or something, but yeah.
Go at it.
I'm sure we can make that happen. And have you got any advice for any aspiring directors? Are there any sort of tips that you keep in mind when you're on set?
For aspiring directors, I always say, I've been very consistent in saying the same thing. You have to go out and shoot as much as you can. I don't think there's any excuses these days because phones have cameras. So if you want to be a filmmaker and a storyteller, get out there and tell stories and shoot. If it's good, it's going to get noticed. That's just how it is. And I find too many people who want to do something make excuses not to do it. So my advice is always just get out there and fail, right? That's what I did. You got to fail until it works.
Yeah. And, even if you fail, as long as you learn from that, it's a learning experience. So next time, if you see yourself as your only competition and you just try and improve on the last thing you did, then you're never failing. You're always learning and hopefully improving.
That's exactly right.
And so my final question to you, have you got any messages for people watching the Sarah O'Connell Show and your fans around the world?
Well, your fans, I think, hopefully they like this interview. I don't know if I have any fans, but I hope that some of your fans. You've got at least one. Thank you. I hope some of your fans will become fans. But this has been really fun, Sarah, and you have a great show. It's fun to watch as well.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. And I love a lot of your shows as well. So we have that in common. Marcos Siega, thank you so much for your time today. It's been an honor speaking to you and celebrating your amazing career.
Thank you so much, Sarah.
And thank you to everybody watching at home. Be sure to share, subscribe, give this video a big thumbs up and leave lots of lovely comments. I'll see you all again soon for another episode of The Sarah O'Connell Show. Bye.
Bye. Thank you again. Hopefully see you again.
Yeah, take care. Bye.
Bye.